Welcome to The Village Lantern, a podcast for families living with hidden challenges such as autism and other neurodiverse conditions, and for anyone else wanting to understand, love and support. Our mission is to build understanding, empathy and love for families living with one or more children who have hidden conditions that make life harder in one way or another. We call this extra zing.
When my eldest got diagnosed and they were in crisis, so this is once again 8, 9, 10-year-old, we brought the psychologist, the assistant principal, the year level coordinator and the teacher all together in a room. Not to talk about the diagnosis, but to say this is not going well. He's being disruptive, but also getting kind of like punished is the wrong word, but told off for particular things that are not their problem. That was really successful.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Hope you've been well. I'm not going to say too much in this intro except to just let you know that this is a Char and Bel conversation, and this time we're talking about education. So we're talking about school, we're talking about the hard things that we face with our kids, the struggles that they experience and also that we try to advocate for and support. There's some positive stuff in there. We've tried really hard to come up with some practical suggestions, but we also just are telling the raw truth of the story, letting everyone know that you're not alone. We acknowledge how hard all of this is, and hopefully it's not too stressful to hear or be reminded about how hard the things that you might be going through are. But we'd love to hear from you, and we hope you love this ep, and let me know. Okay, bye. In the spirit of reconciliation, Takes a Village acknowledges the traditional custodians of country, here on the lands of the Boonwurrung and Wurundjeri Wurrung peoples of the Eastern Kulin Nation, as well as throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. We're back for another one, guys, ladies. We're here again. How are we?
Good, thanks.
Yeah, good week?
Very good.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, I know.
I love it when people say that. I agree, me too. It's been good. We're going to talk about, we're going to scratch the surface of the topic of education today.
Yeah.
Anyone listening who has children who have neurodiverse brains or neurodivergent brains will know that the education system is not designed for much of a variety of child. It's pretty narrow. And even a lot of kids who don't have neurodivergent brains really struggle trying to fit into this narrow, stream of expectation on a whole lot of fronts. So, but for us, education is especially challenging for our kids. I know from my experience, we tried mainstream 3 different times, thinking that each time that we understood the problem and we'd move somewhere else to try and address it, and only to discover that in our case for our daughter that the mainstream, just the model system just could not support her needs, which turned out to be quite significant and actually increased year on year. So by 8-year-old, we had to move into a special school environment, and actually every year after that it was quite clear that the gap got bigger, not smaller, in terms of how she might be able to assimilate, so to speak, back into the mainstream world. So we don't expect by any means to cover the whole gamut, but we're really passionate about this topic, and we want to just start the conversation about school and education and share some of our learnings.
I think that's really interesting that it was 8 years old when you felt mainstream wasn't working for you, which is similar to me in my timeline, because my child's now 9 and is probably just about to step out of mainstream into specialist school. I think it's interesting that we're always warned about the teenage years, but we're never warned about the bit just before, which is when our kids start getting hormones and they start changing. And I found out the other day that autistic kids go through puberty earlier, which was news to me, but I can...
Awesome, thanks for that.
Cheers, thanks for that, university. Yeah, I heard that.
Where did you...
I heard it from a psychologist told me recently, because I was like, why are we dealing with so many of these behaviours now at 8, 9, 10? And she said, well, you know that they autistic kids can go through puberty a lot earlier. They have to, the hormone flooding into their system is completely overwhelming. If you think about trying to be, it's hard enough in life to be neurodivergent in a neurotypical world. The norms are different to what your brain is doing. So it's been really, really hard. And I think it's so interesting, the amount of people that get in touch with me whose children are 8, 9, 10 and struggling is huge. It's almost like a kind of pandemic of struggle, especially around education and schools not being able to support them at that age.
Yeah, I mean, I think
more is expected of you.
Well, that's the thing.
At that age. It's not prep and grade 1 where you're sort of playing and it doesn't matter if you have different academic or behavioural needs.
Yeah, I think it's every year the expectations change, but I think there is a significant turn at that sort of grade 3, 4 level. Because if you think about it, that's halfway through, isn't it? So it's really that if you kind of imagine the trajectory of starting off as a sort of semi-baby, really, as a 4 or 5 year old, and then you've got to get to a place where you're almost a teenager, and so it's that in middle bit. And I find it really, I don't know, if not disturbing, but fascinating / a bit annoying that we didn't realise that puberty starts before you see it.
Yeah, that's true.
So the idea that these hormones are happening where our kids still look like babies, right? That's the thing that I find so. Because people would, I remember when my daughter was younger and people would say, little kids, little problems, big kids, big problems, as if to say things can't be that bad when your kid's young because it's going to get worse. And I just remember at that time, because it was so hard, just thinking, like almost covering my ears, saying, I actually cannot fathom that it's going to get worse because I'm just trying to get through the day right now. And people would say, puberty, wait for that. It can be really hard with kids on the spectrum. And I just thought, please don't.
Really?
Please.
Fuck off.
Oh, yeah, pretty much.
Already
I was
in the hurt locker.
Yes, already in the hurt locker. And then knowing that was coming. But now I think it's fascinating to think that maybe it was starting at 8. Maybe that was that sort of influx of hormones, which we're now like fully living. And I think that it's really important to acknowledge that age, that things, because you look at other 8 and 9 year olds, especially the girls, no, all of them, some of them look so much older, it's really prepubescent, and some of them still look like babies. So I think the shift can happen quite quickly.
And lots of kids are getting their periods at 10.
Right.
Like that's not an unusual. It's considered early but not medically early, like in terms of intervention. It's like, you're 10, that's early on the spectrum, but it's not.
And you can see 7 and 8 year old girls who are starting to kind of like sort of test their womanhood a little bit, a bit sassy, bit of a lip gloss, and you think, oh my God, what? Because for me, every year, the gap between where my child is and where some of the peers are, and especially the more mature ones, I think, this is just getting wider and wider.
Yeah. I was thinking about the education system and sort of I'm not sure how much neurodiverse training that teachers get, like whether individual schools may or may not have programs. I know, for example, say Headspace or things like that might come in and support the teachers, but the experiences that we've had, and I'm talking specifically about my autistic child and the teachers, it's all been individually skilled teachers. Like their natural instinct has been to support my child, and they've done it so well. And when it's done well, particularly because they do present, they can mask very well. So they're not necessarily doing really outrageous stuff in the classroom, but it builds and it builds and it builds, and then you need a teacher to sort of come in. And what they've done in terms of the really practical things is they always kept my child close. So in those years, like grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, they were thinking, okay, this kid's going to have a meltdown. We don't have a diagnosis yet necessarily, but this kid's really smart and they're super challenging. So if I keep them close like an assistant, and so my child used to have a notebook and a pen and literally in grade 3 and follow around the teacher.
I would love that.
And so the teacher would be like, okay, well, you come with me, you can go off and do this, or you can help me with this. And then they felt like they were really important and included, and reduce the meltdowns. Reduce the meltdowns, or got them to do, because the school that most of my children go to is inquiry-based learning, which for some autistic kids, it's really bad.
Too open.
It's too open without structure. But for kids that have bad executive function, so the ADHD part of them, it's great because you can do deep dives into projects.
Yes, hyperfocus.
And so when you've got this kid who's being disruptive, maybe it's boredom, maybe it's overstimulation, they can go and do something else because it's not a structured school thing where you have to have a particular lesson.
I think that thing about certain teachers just having the thing, I wonder if that can be taught. You know, a part of me thinks...
Can patience be taught?
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like,
you're saying...
I'm saying, like, I absolutely agree that understanding how much training is provided, even back at doing your dip ed, right? Even when you're at uni learning about what is it to be a teacher, I wonder how much education there is about how to manage different kinds of kids. I don't know. That's one question.
And I think the teachers, like 75% is behaviour for primary school, but I'm sure they're not taught.
So what happens who knows, what happens in their dip ed, what happens in their training when they do placement, what happens when they join a school, what's professional development for teachers once they're in? All of that would be interesting to understand. But I do also additionally, and I think that there's probably a lot of room for all of that. And but I also wonder that there's not some element of personality or intuition that we all know you can't learn that in a workshop
100%.
About your ability to manage that. And so that is that sort of great unknown of in any school whether the teacher's going to get it,
it's the same as us as parents. There are things that we can learn as parents of neurodiverse children, and there are things that if we don't have much patience or we're not, we're a highly strung person or whatever it is that particular traits, it's going to make it more difficult. Same with teachers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
But you can tell the teachers that have been on the training courses because they really make a difference. Like it really helps that, and I know the mainstream school that my 9-year-old's currently at, pretty much all the teachers have had some kind of training in autism. And I think it's important because I think in his mainstream school, there is almost 1 or 2 autistic kids in each year group.
That must be a bit of a magnet, that school.
It is. I mean, it's become now.
We have that.
I mean,
do you?
Yeah, for sure. At least I would.
Are they like out? Like, does everyone know? Because I think that's one of
No. I mean,
how do you know then? How do you know what the numbers are?
Autistic radar.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
I mean, also I outright ask because I'm coming to this country. I'm like, how many autistic kids have you got at your school?
Same. Yeah.
You need to know that they're able to accommodate your child, and if you're one of the only parents going to be advocating in that way, then it's going to be really hard. I mean, at our school in England, we had a little group of us parents who were, thrown together who had the kind of neurodiverse kids or the kids with disabilities, and we were a bit of a force. You need to stand together because sometimes, you have to go and advocate for your child in the school, and they're saying, sorry, we're not going to give you this. And you're like, but this is my child and they need this. So you need a bit of a crew. And that's really hard when you're moving to a new school because you don't know any of the parents, whatever.
Can we talk about what that advocating looks like? Because I think that's what a lot of parents don't, like you don't know until you're confident, until you have more experience, is what advocating for your child, like what does that look like for all of us? Because
I think that the scary thing is when you get shut down by, like, I don't know if you've got a special education need person in that school going, well, no, this is what we're going to do. And you're like, no, I know my child best and this is what they need. And they're saying no. And you're like, that is really hard. So how do you get, I've had a lot of people get in touch with me since the podcast to say, can you talk about this? I'm having a real trauma with my kids' school. They're not listening to me. They're not this. And that's really hard because it's hard enough. Like it's hard enough to get your kids to school. It's hard enough to get them the education they deserve. But then to be fighting with a school is the hardest because often I mean you want a school that wants your child there and they're so happy that they're there, that they're teaching everyone something as well, and isn't it an amazing thing? You don't want to send your child to a school that doesn't want your child. I mean, there's nothing worse. It's the most despondent, depressing feeling. So we need I find it really difficult when people contact me and say, my child's school is not accommodating them or not listening to me when I say this is what they need. Often I just think, take your child away from that school because I know it's not often it's difficult because that might be the only school in the area that you can send your child to. But how awful to be your child to know they're at a school and that school almost doesn't want them
it's
because
trauma,
they're not.
Right?
Yeah,
it's
trauma.
actually contributing to their trauma.
But it also depends what you as a parent are doing. So when my eldest got diagnosed and they were in crisis, so this is once again 8 and 9, 10-year-old, we brought the psychologist, the assistant principal, the year level coordinator and the teacher all together in a room, right? Not to talk about the diagnosis, but to say, this is not going well. Like, my child's is being disruptive, but also getting kind of like punished is the wrong word, but told off for particular things that are not their problem. That was really successful. Also, my child did not want to leave the school. I did that with my youngest and we didn't bring that many people together, but we tried that approach. It didn't work. And they were like, get me out of here. So there's different, sometimes you want to stay at the school, therefore that advocacy is really, really important. But other times I agree with what you're saying. It's like, get them out of there, because it's just not working.
Yeah.
That approach doesn't work.
Yeah. And I think to the question about what do I do, I think there are lots of different ways that you can try. Of course, there's some things that are harder. Some people find certain things harder, like pushing in, disagreeing, confrontation, that can be really hard. But I do think that what seems to be effective, or at least one version of helpful, is if you can bring other experts, right? So you might bring an OT in and get them to observe.
Explain.
Right? Well, observe, right? So, because I know in our case, one of the things that's been really hard is actually to understand what the triggers are, because we're getting triggered and it's seemingly out of nowhere. So the teachers will say, we don't know what happened. All of a sudden there was an elevation of mood or whatever, and it just exploded. And so I think in the case for my daughter, the teachers would say they didn't know what the trigger was. And this is in a school where there's 12 kids in a classroom, 1 teacher and 2 aides in the room. So it's basically 1 to 4, and they still can't work it out. Now, I'm not saying that that's their fault. I'm saying it's really complex. And sometimes you bring in someone else. So our speech pathologist went into school recently and observed. And this speech pathologist knows her, knows what her challenges are, knows her as an individual quite well. But she'd never seen her in that context, because one of the things that I find really hard is my daughter's very different at school to what she's like at home. I mean, there's some things that we see the same, but school is really triggering for her. And basically she'll get in there and then already she's at a different place in terms of self-regulation. I don't know what happens there. I can't observe. And so sending in an expert psychologist.
What did they say?
Well, they did notice some, I mean, of course, like what's it called, Murphy's Law, when it didn't happen on the day that she came in.
Always.
But she was able to make observations about things that could be like overstimulating, how the classroom setup was, what the dialogue was between, say, the teachers and the other students, or I think
that's brilliant. I think that's such a brilliant idea.
So sending, it could be an OT, it could be a psychologist, to go in and observe in that setting. And once you've got, I think in some ways it's easier to advocate if you've got, the OT says you need these things, rather than the mum or the dad saying it. Yeah. Not because we don't know, but because the system prefers when other people with a proper title say it.
And we've got a really comprehensive OT report for high school to help with my child needs to use the computer because their handwriting is not just that it's messy, but they actually get exhausted.
Yeah.
And I think that's a key thing that I didn't realise. It took me a while along the autistic journey to say that comprehensive report is like, well, maybe later on they're going to be doing their exams on a computer because they can't keep up with everybody else.
Yeah.
So, having an expert come in seems to be what people listen to.
Yeah, I think so. And so, but that's expensive.
Because they're an expert.
Right, of course, not
expensive,
you.
And I could get it back on NDIS, but not everyone has that.
There's all of that, right? You have to pay for those things, and you have to, if you can be organised enough and planned enough, you can put it into your funding for the following year, and then you can. But that's one of the things I'm learning now is as I'm going in through a funding review, I'm getting advice from them about how often do I need a report from you? Let's put it in now. But that's 2 or 3 years into the process and up until now, I've just paid for it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think for me as well at the moment with our journeys, like my child has a PDA version of autism, which is pathological demand avoidance, which, everything that is the demands triggers a huge anxiety that's like a fight or flight, aggressive response. So if you imagine what a school is like, it's just a series of demands, constant demands. So I'm at that point now where I'm on a lot of support groups for PDA families. And
so PDA is pretty well known in the UK, isn't it? But just getting some recognition here. Can you talk us through it a bit?
Yeah, it's just starting to get recognition in Australia. But actually, even in England, it's not a formal diagnosis. We were told about it. They're not allowed to kind of formally diagnose PDA, which is actually really frustrating because it is a particular type of autism trait that is very different to, let's call it regular autism. It affects everything. It probably is the basis for my child's biggest struggles in life.
I think my daughter's the same.
So if you think about a demand of school, it is horrific for him. And at the moment, we're on a bit of a journey because we are trying to change schools. He says going to school feels like he's dying there. He doesn't feel psychologically safe. He hates every minute. But when he's there, we know that seems happy and he's getting on and doing stuff. So it's really difficult. There's a lot of masking. He's really good at masking and he just says, I have to do what I have to do to get by. And when I'm on these support groups, pretty much every child on there doesn't go to school because it's too traumatic. And I've got that in the back of my mind and I'm like, when he's crying on the way to school every morning, I'm like, what am I doing? Do I do this? Do I put him in here? At the moment, he's only doing 2 hours a day. Okay. So that for me is like, come on, it's just keeping you in there. We're going in. You just can see your friends. You don't have to do much. They're really accommodating him. They're being, super, super supportive. But he absolutely hates it. So I'm like, what am I doing? So most of the PDA children that I know are homeschooled. So I have to get my head around this idea that I might eventually have to homeschool him.
In high school as well?
I've said that in the past and everyone around me says, do not do that. I think there's other solutions, which we should really go into and explore. Because you can't have your child at home all day, every day.
And it's not healthy for him. We've had 3 months of him at home with no schooling. And I can tell you now, everyone went a bit crazy. And he went crazy. He needed people, he needed people. I could see him just like disappearing into this iPad world and shrinking as a person. But I do a lot of research with autistic adults and I read a lot about PDA, and there is a trauma that happens at school with a lot of autistic kids, and they grow up to be adults that are very traumatized by school experience. And so I have to get it right. And I'm this is a whole new thing for me. I'm learning about PDA, and once you start learning about it, it's really enlightening, and it's completely changing how I'm parenting, everything. Everything. I can't parent him in the way I was before.
And Char, is this a psychiatrist is helping you with this diagnosis? Where did you find out this specific type of
So when he was first diagnosed, we were given a psychologist through the NHS, and that was the first time I'd ever heard this PDA. She also mentioned ODD, oppositional defiance disorder.
Back when he was 3 or 4.
So he was probably, at this point, maybe he was 5.
Okay.
And we were like, oppositional defiance disorder. He's quite oppositional, but that doesn't seem like him. And then she mentioned PDA, and we were like, that's him. And it's basically, any demand, whether that's put on your shoes, can you pass me the remote control, is met with resistance to the point of extreme.
And panic and sort of anxiety goes straight up.
And he will flare and then, he's fine it's not often he's fine, or it can turn into a humongous meltdown simply because you've asked him to pass the pen or get himself a glass of water. I mean, things like that, the demand situation. And I'm learning a lot about it, and it's, there's all these techniques which are like when I ask him to do something, I do it in quite a sing-song voice. It's always a question. It's not a demand.
Get yourself a pen.
Then that is time to get up.
Does it work?
Oh my gosh.
The sing-song?
The sing-song is pretty cool. Yeah, it's
Really?
it just lightens the mood and not being this demand.
You know, it's so interesting that you say that. I've sort of given up on reading anything because I'm just a bit broken. But as I hear you, I'm like, no, I actually need to get back to that because if there are techniques, it's definitely the case for my child. And actually, I'd say, even though I just said to you, don't homeschool. I also, having said that, I quite recently, I said to my daughter who's starting a high school this year, or next year rather, I said, if you are as unhappy there as you have been, we will find another solution. I agree with you. Yeah. You cannot keep pushing them into that.
Can't.
No.
It's traumatic. And life's already hard enough, you know. I can't add to his trauma. I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? Because I never really wanted to go to school when I was young, and I can relate in that sense. I have to be careful I'm not being triggered and being like, oh my God, I didn't like school either. But it's different. There must be something really shit about going to school and feeling like you're dying or it's not safe, or psychologically everyone is different to you, so you need to toe the line. It feels like he's always failing, and that's wrong. He isn't failing. He's just going at his own pace, and he doesn't want to learn in the same way as the rest of the kids in the class.
And why do we need to? Whoever said you have to have done all your learning by a certain age? Exactly. I think the other thing that I am starting to be able to see and understand, you hear a lot of people say that school's the worst because once you can get out of school, if you think about it, you can choose how you live your day, right? Yeah. You can choose where you go to work or study or whatever. You can choose the hours. You can choose the environment.
You can choose the people you spend
time with. You can choose the topics right? At school,
you have no control.
You can't. And you have to do what everyone else does. And it's not really designed. You have no agency. And I reckon that's, if we think about it like that, we've got to get them educated enough in the basics. They don't need to do dance and drama if they don't want to. If they awesome.
Do that the whole time and nothing else.
Well, but I feel like they have to have a level of maths and English, right? In order that they can be not treated, not taken advantage of. I think they have to have enough education that they can get through in the world without being considered
this is difficult though, because my child has an issue with maths, right?
But I'm just saying, addition, the things that allow you to go to the shops and not get screwed over, those sorts of things.
Totally. But even that, like he can't go to a shop and buy anything with cash because he's terrified of the maths involved. Oh. So that affects his life, right? That is actually affecting his enjoyment of life or living his life. And, you know, his old school, it was such a trigger, maths, that he'd have to be removed from the classroom during maths.
Oh, it's same for my daughter.
Yeah. So now there's huge gaps in his learning, and the school here is saying, well, he's probably at, grade 1 maths and he's grade 4.
Yep.
He just has huge gaps. And I think, that's so difficult because if you have gaps in learning for maths, it's not like you can kind of get by and fudge it.
Yeah.
You don't know how to build the building blocks to go up to the next level.
You know what I think is really powerful in that one is to kind of backtrack and say, what other life skills do you need? Which ones of them use maths concepts and how... because you kind of have to, you don't need trigonometry, right? Probably not. You probably don't need calculus. What do you need? Yeah. And I reckon that rather than just calling it maths, work backwards from the life skills that are going to require it and which ones can they manage and which ones can't they? And then you can put the gaps in place to
That's what we're doing now with the therapists. We're working towards, earning money through chores, to then count that money and take it to a shop and buy some things and get some change because there's something in it for him because he can buy something. Yeah. But he's so clever. He's like, I know this is math. You're like, no, you can buy, if little Johnny has 3 and you need to get a Mars bar, how much change do you need? And he's like, stop with the math. Yeah. He literally, he's too clever.
I was just going to say, obviously, autism is a spectrum, but my child loves maths.
Yeah.
Because, and
I think your child should teach my child math. I feel.
But I realised what it is that, not what it is, but it's because there's an answer.
Oh, that's why I love it.
Yeah, because they love, because they're autistic.
Very solid,
brain, They're solid.
Black and white, yeah.
And so even though they're like a bookworm and they absolutely love, fantasy and novels and writing, they are hating English and humanities.
It's too open.
Because, there's so much grey. grey area. And I remember just going, I'm sort of tying it back to to teachers, and obviously my child presents very differently to both of yours. But if you've got an autistic child in a mainstream school, some really key things that you can do to advocate for your child is we didn't even realise this. My 14-year-olds at the time when they were in grade 5, their teacher pulled them out of NAPLAN. And which is really weird because in grade 3 they were like, had a massive panic attack in NAPLAN. The teacher sat with them, the principal sat with them.
Can you explain just quickly NAPLAN, because I've got a few English people following. What's that?
So NAPLAN is the testing that is Australia-wide that is done in grade 3, grade 5, year 7 and year 9 so that so that the government and the public can have an overview of the education standards within Australia. So you have spelling, writing, maths, like a grammar one.
Yeah.
And then most of them multiple choice, except you do have to write. So having to
really
do that.
stressful. Yeah.
Really stressful. They could do it if it was multiple choice, if it was a maths problem, anything, and they would screw it up and throw it out. The teacher, without even asking us, but the teacher was brilliant, just went, you know what? Arrived in the morning for NAPLAN for the time writing and went and could see how panicked the child was and goes, let's just not even go there today.
Go and get a muffin from the tuck shop.
And then afterwards retrospectively said, I hope you're okay with this.
Right, yeah.
This is what we did. And I was sort of like, but I wanted to see their results. And then I was like,
Why?
Yeah.
Why?
They had a full panic attack in grade 3.
Yeah.
Why? And I thought that was brilliant. So circling back is pulling them out of things. Like the psychologist was like, you should have pulled them out of all of it. Does it really matter for your child? And so for some parents of autistic kids saying they don't need to do a LOT, a language other than English.
Yeah.
They don't need to do the drama.
Yeah.
They don't need to do the additional activities.
Yeah.
Keeping
that
them
is absolutely
into the
something
basics.
that I have been trying to test. So I've talked to a lot of schools, and actually I did a bit of an exercise while I was trying to work out the high school offering where I actually did a research piece of understanding what the school offerings were. And one of the questions I asked was, how open are you to adjusting the expectations? I.e., they don't, can you pull them out of certain stuff? Do you know most of them said, we can't do that?
Yeah, no, they can't because they're scared. No, particularly with, like, say, public schools, you have criteria that you have to meet as well. And so it's easier for...
It affects their results, doesn't it?
Easier for a private school private schools, I have a whole issue with that in terms of their dealings of neurodiverse kids, but... it's easy for them often to say... But
they won't. I asked them too. They won't do it. Well, I don't know that they're worse or better, but I think what the problem that they face is, which I understand, is that how do they... And I don't think this is actually that complicated, but I think they're worried that if they do it for one group of kids, where do they draw the line? And I'm like, draw the line at trauma, right? Draw the line at actually what your purpose is to educate kids. And there has to be some nuance between what that looks like for different kids. And because I think actually the best solution for our child, and actually it relates to my youngest as well. In fact, all of my children struggle with getting through the full day of a full curriculum. Yeah. It's too much for them. It's too much. And I've asked, can we pull, and during COVID we did it, right? During COVID I said, we're just doing English, maths, science and humanities. It's all we can manage. We can't do, they just can't, and even that was hard. But actually I think that would, and then of course throw in something that you love or take something out if you have to. But
do you know what's interesting in my son's mainstream school at the moment? I actually was there yesterday because my daughter had an induction to go into it. She's only little. But they're trialling a new school day where they cram all the kind of important stuff in the morning.
Yeah.
And then they're going to, the afternoon, the last hour is just going to be chill time, do your own projects, do
that's
some
what
inquiry.
the special school model is.
Yeah, and they're going to do that because they said kids are, after lunch, she said they're all in kind of food coma. They're all run around. They're like, I can't be bothered to do this anymore. Yeah. And so it's amazing. And I think, that obviously will help a lot of kids.
And teachers. Poor teachers trying to do so much.
Or even what our school, the inquiry-based learning school, do. They have brain breaks all the time, which is great for my ADHD kids because...
To encourage them to eat as well. Is it like a fruit snack thing?
So you have a brain break where it has to be fruit or veggies. And then for kids who are super active like mine, they do run around the school.
Oh, so good.
And then they come back,
really
I had a brain break.
Oh, so good. I need that.
I know.
When I used to work in an office, totally off track, if I had to have a phone call, I would go into a meeting room
And pace.
and like lap the table, like pretty fast, because my brain worked better when I was moving.
Yeah.
And like same thing, right? Sitting in an office, same sitting in a classroom.
I hate
for
sitting
most,
down,
so
having
uncomfortable.
difficult conversations. I need to move.
I know, just any conversation.
That's why
my brain works better when
That's
I'm
why
moving.
even doing recording this, we're all like, what's that banging? It's like we're all just
me.
moving.
Jiggling
We're all
up.
rocking. We're all jiggling and rocking and tapping.
We're
And
so like talking about this very, very passionate thing.
yeah.
Do we want to do a quick round the grounds around practical things that we know have worked? Because
Yeah.
I think we're going to keep talking about this. We like to try and keep each conversation not too long, so it's sort of digestible. But by no means do we feel like we've covered the whole topic. But we love practical.
Yeah.
Let's just anything that you've already found that's worked. Let's hear it.
So a big thing, if you can, is getting rid of all the extracurricular. I know that's been a huge thing for a lot of my friends who've got autistic kids.
How have they gone with that?
One in particular.
You're talking about after school.
After school, also Lotes language other than English
Right.
in school.
Uh-huh.
So definitely one of them who's got a year 5 kid has recently pulled them out of the language. It's
Yeah.
just too hard.
Yeah.
Got enough issues trying to actually work out how to read faces and understand, in an
using
environment where there's
English. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
I think a big one for those who maybe have got a new diagnosis or they're changing schools or they're starting a new school is to get your child's psychologist with the year level coordinator, with the teacher and with the parents in there so that you can advocate for whatever they need.
Do you know what I'd add to that is get a cognitive psychology assessment done.
Yeah.
Because it gives you that insight into where are their strengths, where are their gaps, and then you can use that in the conversation with the school to really prep
Same with
them.
potentially an OT report, which is reminding me that actually my friend / neighbour who has 3 boys with ADHD, how she was able to get them to not do a LOT, this is in high school, the same high school that my kids go to, was through the full OT report and speech reports.
Yeah.
And saying they've got dyslexia and ADHD and
And the cognitive psychology report will also do that.
Yeah.
It'll say where you've got a gap, because the gap, what it tells you is what's extra hard and what creates more stress. And then it's determining some of those things maybe you really have to dig into and find a way to make them work. Some of them you can get, just take them off the list, but you need that information.
Another big one for our family as well, because obviously my kids are never at school on time and we get called all the time by the year level coordinator, is to just say, I will always back you on this to your child.
Yes.
So I want them to get to school, and that's great if they can get there in the first period. And when I get those phone calls, I just say, I'm really happy they're at school today. Thank you for letting me know that they're late.
I have actually done something similar. And also, so sometimes I let them sleep in and miss first period. If just having a bit more sleep is really good. Sometimes I give them a mental health day at home.
Yeah, so that's key.
Right.
Those mental health
Just-
days in a term.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing here that you guys in Australia allow mental health days.
We're not allowed. We just do them.
do it.
I know,
It's a
but
sick day.
But listen,
The kid's just not there.
No, but you have a system where you can put parental choice on your.
Well, I mean,
You know, in England, we get literally.
the truant's officer knocking on the door.
You get fined. You get put in jail. I mean,
My child still gets detentions when they're late, by the way. That's just
Right.
me saying that I'm
And what happened to
Yeah.
they
have to
still
stay
have to
in
go
at lunchtime.
Well, that's awful.
Actually, I
They
think
don't
they
care.
don't mind
Yeah,
because they do
lunchtime's
some
like-
homework.
And lunchtime's
Confusing.
stressful.
And they're tired.
Yeah.
They said they just sit in the library tired.
Oh, so it's not a punishment. It's good.
Yeah.
But
Don't
yeah,
tell the school.
we're not
No.
allowed to. I remember when we first arrived and we were like, we were having a lot of trauma with our child's trying to fit in and learn, and he just moved countries, new school, everything new. And they were like, he can have some time off if mental health break.
Your school said that.
This is the
Your
school
school's
here,
amazing, yeah.
and they're amazing. And it was is a teacher originally from England, and I just kept emailing back, going, "Are you sure? I mean, this is amazing. Like, thank you so much, because I think he needs a bit of time off." And she's like, "This isn't England.
Yeah.
We don't come with you with the police if you don't bring your child to school. If he needs time off, he needs time off.
Yeah.
If he's mentally exhausted,
Yeah.
he needs to be not in here for a bit. And that made me feel good. And I think you do need a supportive school that allows that.
Yeah. And you also need to, I think you mentioned something before about checking your own issues. Like I'm such a good girl. Like I always did what I was told and I followed the rules and it's really important to me. And so even when I get a call from school, sometimes I think I'm getting in trouble.
Get in trouble.
And so that's been quite a big shift for me to have to go, it's not about actually, I'm not here to please everybody. I'm actually here to make sure my children can, you know, manage that long run to get through school. And so, and so now I realize, like, I have to, if I have that initial pang of, oh my God, I'm getting in trouble, I remember, hang on, you know, your job here is different. And then I will say, yep, we're late today. And I say to the kids, but all of them, just go through and what do I write when I say, because you've got to get a little late slip, just medical appointment, right? Because it's actually, like having an extra sleep in my opinion, is a medical requirement.
That's true.
In order that you, or a mental health requirement, because your anxiety is so bad. And even for my little guy whose anxiety, he's still got school refusal. I mean, he's just, even before COVID, he had school refusal. He's had problems with school forever. And every night, I don't want to go. And he wakes up in the morning, I don't want to go. And I've got a bit of a cough. And COVID was great for him because every time he was like, well, I've got a runny nose, I can't go. You know, and I think the other thing in terms of, you know, how we think about things, I've totally shifted what I expect my children to have achieved once they get through school. Totally lowering, #lower the bar. You know, like you don't finish your education when you finish high school. There's lots of different ways you can keep on learning. And actually the mental health trauma matter is harder to undo as an adult, as a young adult, than catching up on a bit of maths or learning how to write a better essay.
I think that's important that we know that and this sounds awful, but the parents have to do the work. I hate it when people say that, but because, you know, I want to throw my kid out into school and be like, bye.
Oh, yeah.
And like trundle off and go to work and not think about him all day and not worry. But, you know, often I've had to do the work and go, okay, I need to work out what school means to him now, that it's not the same as me and that he's a different person to me, and that exactly that with the teachers, I'm like, I'm so sorry. Sorry it's late. You know, it's like, what? Why? You know, you gave me a really good bit of advice actually the other day, which was that you never put meetings really early in the day so that you know you've got time if they're going to be late. So because they feed off your panic of like, get your shoes on, we're going to be late, and you get really stressed and they can feel it.
And that, I have to say, for me to come up with that strategy is genius. And I'm saying that because my ADHD makes it really hard for me to be practical like that. So for me to come up with that, it took me years, and I felt so proud of myself. I was like, good on you, Anna. You find that hard. You found a way, and now you're managing it. You know,
Scott does that. He blocks out like the morning.
I don't have any meetings till 10.
Well, he blocks out till 9:30 because of the stress of the morning and he knows he's never going to get into the office or do that. And with such a big job, once it's on, it's on. But 100%.
I mean, I've just got funding for a support worker to help with the mornings because it is such a traumatic experience and it's really hard. And if there's only one parent there, if one's already gone to work, it's impossible to get, you know, with this PDA, the demands of getting up, it's very stressful. And we're going to need...
You're busy singing.
I'm obviously doing my thing. Good job.
Breakfast, lunch, shoes and brush your teeth.
Which cereal? I mean, my new one is...
Do you do it with gritted teeth?
I know, obviously. Sometimes you really don't want to sing. But...
We've just got a guest who's just arrived. 2 minutes. Sit down. Join us. And so I think the other practical thing, and one other practical thing is like... start to work out what's hard.
Yeah.
Start to notice what's hard and start to build supports around that. And that's not just school, that's everything.
And maybe I just finish with a slightly positive story as well, is back to that advocacy, is that if you get to the point where you know the way your child learns and the way that your child builds relationships, which often takes a lot, they need to be teenage years, is actually being really explicit with teachers. And that's what I've had to do, where there's a teacher that is really struggling with my child neurodivergence, like they just can't handle it. And I just wrote this email saying, these are the ways that you could get along with my child better.
Yes.
Not in a rude way. That's sounding rude.
No, it's helpful.
It's like they like reading. They like queer films. They like this sort of thing. If you can find something in common.
Okay, so this is actually live family. We have a therapy dog. We have a daughter who's in the room. I feel like this needs to be included because it represents the actual life.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe we need to sign off, ladies, just because of this. Do you want to say hi, Millie?
Millie, your hair, it's
Millie.
beautiful.
I feel like as listeners, you guys, this is real, right? I feel like if you keep wondering, how do they get all this time to be in a quiet room without being disturbed?
No.
Well, we don't always. So here we are. Now we've got 2 dogs, a child.
Various texts.
You know, yeah. So I think time to sign off, but just scratch the surface, I think, as we said about education, but so much more. And we'd love any listeners to throw in their ideas, suggestions, what's worked well. We'd love to hear it because we can share it. You know, what we want to do is share what other learnings that people have. 2 dogs. 2 dogs.
But that one had its mouth closed.
2 dogs.
You've got 2 dogs, a cat, a budgie.
2 dogs.
Oh.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, signing off. Lovely, amazing women. And until next time.
Yes.
Goodbye.
Thank
See
you.
you.
Bye.
Keep singing. Keep singing.
Cereal. Bye.